Hello, I'm your host, Peter Komendowski, and welcome to Surviving Bad, where we explore stories of survival, hope, and inspiration. Today, we're looking into suicide prevention and mental health with a young man, Samuel Geery, a student athlete at Bates College in Maine, that you may have seen on NBC's Golf Channel, among others, where he talks about an organization he co-founded, Kick It for a Cause. He has championed adolescent mental health and suicide prevention. Let's welcome Sam and find out the rest of the story. Sam, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got to this point.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for the introduction and thank you for having me. So my story really begins back in my eighth grade year. So back in 2016, I was back home in Woburn, Massachusetts. So about 10 minutes north of Boston. And, I felt like I had everything going for me. I really felt like I had the world on my shoulders, and I was doing. And admittedly, I was doing really well. I was in an extremely privileged position. I was given so many opportunities until, unfortunately, I woke up one morning and felt off. This feeling of this feeling is something that I'll never forget. At the time, I was very much into golf, and still am. But I noticed all of a sudden that I lost all of my passion for the game. At first, I thought it was burnout. I had been playing the game for so long that it kind of made sense. So I tried to let it kind of sizzle and simmer down, and hopefully let these feelings pass. Unfortunately, they didn't simmer and they only got worse. This loss of passion for golf turned into a loss of will to live, and it was really scary. I'll never forget the times where I was sitting in my basement before going to bed, seriously contemplating taking my own life. Unfortunately, it's something that's been on and off since then. But starting in my sophomore year, I've used my story, what I think is for good, and hopefully helping others. I first started with the American Junior Golf Association, which is one of the leading junior golf organizations in the country. You can think of this as like an AAU basketball or a travel soccer league, essentially for golf. And they offer an opportunity for young golfers to raise funds for a charity of their choice and share their stories, and that's exactly what I did. I was admittedly maybe a bit brash in how I went about sharing my experiences with depression, anxiety, and suicidal ideation. But it was actually far more successful than I ever could have expected. Like I said, even though I was finding this success, I still really was struggling. Like you said, when I was on the Golf Channel, in the middle of that segment, it's or around that time in October of 2018, I wasn't feeling great, which seems so crazy looking back on it, but unfortunately, that's the truth.
And how old were you at that time, just to get us recentered on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So at that time, so October 2018, I would have been 17. So I was a sophomore in high school. I don't know. I was actually just beginning my junior year of high school when I was on the Golf Channel, and I first started the initial fundraiser with my story when I was a sophomore, so April of 2018. Since then, like I said, I've been very fortunate to make a bunch of media appearances, which has been so much fun, and I've really been able to enjoy helping adolescents and other kids like me who are struggling and feel like they don't have a voice. To really combat that, I'm the co-founder of Kick It for a Cause Incorporated here in Massachusetts, which is a charity kickball tournament turned nonprofit organization that I started with a good buddy of mine, Noah Dollywall, that I went to high school with here in Massachusetts. We still have the kickball tournament every year. Actually, we're tentatively set to hold our 2021 event on June 26th, which is going to be super, super fun. But we've also started a scholarship awarding $1,500 to a young man and a young woman who are passionate about mental health awareness and suicide prevention. and also looking into legislative work in the state of Massachusetts, because there's most certainly a kind of a gap that needs to be filled there as far as mental health awareness, education, and preventing adolescent suicide. Because as the statistics will tell you, it's a incredible issue that is so unfortunate and very, very preventable.
And when we look back at when this first happened to you, you talked about it was like you woke up one day and you recognized you were just a little off. Was it that instantaneous, or did you sort of realize that, sometime in the past few weeks, months or something, I got off? I mean, how did that's sort of a really interesting point in life to figure out, because not everybody's aware of that.
Yeah, it unfortunately, I wish it wasn't, but it was instantaneous. I went to bed. I was feeling really good. The night before, I was playing like Xbox with my dad. We had awesome conversations about golf or just life in general. Nothing out of the norm for us. And I woke up one morning, and at that time, I had felt this like intense passion for golf. I loved it. I loved being able to get out on the course and practice and spend all my summers playing. And it was a February morning. I woke up and there was just nothing there. And it wasn't these first feelings. These first feelings weren't necessarily suicidal thoughts. It was just kind of that loss of passion for golf. So that's really how it started.
We're going to take a short break. When we come back, we're going to continue our conversation with Samuel Geery. Stay tuned. You don't want to miss this. Welcome back to Surviving Bad. I'm your host, Peter Komendowski, and we're talking with the young celebrity in the world of mental health and suicide prevention, Sam, a man who's not afraid to take on a tough challenge. But Sam, as you were saying, this started for you in high school, and you were very young, and it came on like a switch. What were the first days like? Who did you reach out to? Who did you talk to? Or did you just talk to yourself? What was life like?
Yeah, at the very beginning, I really didn't talk to anybody. Like I mentioned before, I kind of just suspected that these were feelings of burnout towards golf, and I would be able to just kind of let it simmer and let it pass. So I really didn't talk to anybody about it. I didn't talk to my parents. I didn't talk to any of my friends. I kind of was really just repressing my thoughts, or at least trying to. I was watching. I was watching golf YouTube videos, relentlessly to try to spark something, but unfortunately, just didn't work. When I recognized that this wasn't something that was going away, maybe even 3 or 4 weeks later, that's when I reached out to my parents and I was like, this may be something serious. I don't know what it is at the time. Admittedly, I wasn't very familiar with depression, or maybe symptoms of depression, that sort of thing. So I had no idea. I was kind of just in the mind space, like, oh my gosh, I need help. After that, we looked into options for therapy. Talk therapy at first. But even at that point, I still hadn't reached out or talked to any of my friends about it. I very much felt like I would have been seen as cowardly if I spoke up about it. That I would have been seen as, the kid with depression, the kid with anxiety. He's always in a rut, or he's always feeling down. Obviously, looking back on it, those thoughts seem a bit silly to me, knowing what I do now. But at the time, they were very real. And it's something that really, really bothered me. And it wasn't until I released that initial story with the American Junior Golf Association through that fundraiser, that really anybody except for my parents found out. And that was really, really scary. But looking back on it, I'm really, really glad I did it. And I have no regrets there at all. Now
Did you get a lot of fans? I mean, did you get a lot of kids that you knew that said, "Hey, wow, that's I hear where you're coming from," and things like that?
Yeah. So I think probably one thing that inspires me the most, and one thing that really took me back was, people who had been really, really close friends for a long time, and then them having the courage to reach out to me and share what they were going through. And these are people where, you would have never thought that they were going through something. I at the time there were probably about 20 or 30 people that I knew, and many more that I had never met before, who had reached out, and their bravery and courageousness really motivated me and inspired me to keep on pushing and keep on moving. The recognition for what I do is great. I certainly don't take it for granted, and I'm very grateful for it. But what I think is what's most important to me are the people who feel like they have a voice and really are just such incredible individuals.
You use words like brave and courageous, which are hard words, really, because they point towards really difficult times.
Mm-hmm.
And fascinatingly enough, in your generation, you said the first place you went were like golf YouTube videos. And I think to myself, where would the first place have been before the internet, which is just like 20 years ago? It's not that long ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
Was that a strange place to be, sort of looking at when you were sitting there pushing keys and watching the videos? Did it all of a sudden say, I really need to talk to my parents because this is not going to do it?
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, I didn't think much about it at first. I'm like, all right, watch golf YouTube videos. I do this all the time anyways. Maybe it'll spark something. And then you kind of have like that oh no moment where you recognize, like, I probably should talk to people about this. I think saying that, social media, I guess it's up for debate whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, but it certainly isn't going to help you through issues like depression and anxiety, or any mental illness for that matter. If anything, for the most part, it'll make it worse. And that's where, with my advocacy on social media, I'm really trying to change things. Normally I feel like social media is a very, very toxic place. Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, even, you name it, it's not a great place to be, especially as being 19 years old right now. And when I was really in the thick of these things, 16, 17, 18. So I think the biggest thing, especially as far as advice goes, is for anyone struggling with this, reach out to people and really don't seek social media for therapeutic help or for assistance in that way.
Well, thank you, Sam. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about what it's like growing up as a teenager, the scary stuff, and the good things that you see that are inspiring a new generation of young adults. See you all after the break. Welcome back to Surviving Bad. We're talking with Sam Geery and how his life has blessed him with a passion to help teens and young adults face some difficult challenges. Sam, at the end of the last break, we talked a little bit about social media. And, we like to think that media can be good or bad. There's positives and negatives. But there's this old adage that says there's a difference between the map and the territory. And, adults are really good at laying out maps and processes and procedures. But the territory, like you were defining, where you're the first generation that really can immerse in social media. And then I hear your powerful message about reconnecting with people. That seems to be a theme. What's your insight on sort of how the world has changed, not just pandemic, but also media, and what's really important to get people back on track to get the most out of life?
Certainly. And I feel like this is ever more important for young people growing up. I think it's, fortunately or unfortunately, I'm kind of in that age group where when I was very little, we didn't really have social media, or like my early, like preteen or early teen years, it wasn't much of a thing. So I'm fortunate that I kind of got out in that sense. But I'm going to be completely frank. When the notion that children and even teenagers, people my age are really glued to social media, and obviously now as I get older, just the media in general, like we saw with the past election, or certain takes on the pandemic or the vaccine, whatever it may be. I think it's really, really concerning, especially in an age where, or at a time where it's our mental well-being is so important during a pandemic. I think the greatest, and this is a bit of a cliche, but the greatest piece of advice I could give on this idea is just avoid it as much as possible. And obviously that's much easier said than done. But it's really, really important. Whether whoever's listening to this, whether it be a parent or a kid, or I think, don't get me wrong, social media certainly has its ups. But in my opinion, a lot of the time it has more downs. And I think that this idea of the danger of comparison, I think the one of the worst things that happens on social media is when we compare ourselves to others, and when we compare our experiences to others, when we can't do so. For example, with mental illness, with depression, anxiety. I mean, the way I experience depression is going to be different than most people out there. You shouldn't base the validity of your mental illness based on what other people have experienced, and that happens a lot on social media. Um, whether people be comparing, like I said, mental illness, or just lives in general. Oh, he has so much more than me, or they have so much more than me. Oh, they get to go on these nice trips. Why am I not? It's really deprecating in a way. And I really think if you can kind of eliminate that as much as possible, you'll really put yourself in a good spot, and really set yourself up for success.
There are people, social scientists, that say that a lot of the mental health issues have some correlation with the state of the world. In other words, implying that we as adults that have built this world haven't made it as compassionate or as connected to youth as it should be. From your point of view, growing up in this world, is some of this stress, does some of the stress come from what you see as sort of a social dysfunction when you talk about the elections and controversies about the COVID and all this stuff?
Yeah, for sure. I think part of this is because we have, there's so much access. I think first off, I think it's relatively well known that the media definitely favors pretty negative stories, whether it's to catch the attention of as many people as possible. That's not my play. That's not really my place to judge, I guess. But I think that the fact that the media are oftentimes so negative, and it's so accessible, it really stresses kids out. Now, I think it's important to not be oblivious about these things. Obviously, there are certain issues we need to be able to recognize, but going on a news page, or scrolling through social media, a lot of the issues that go on today, it'll really beat you down after a while. And like I said, it's important to be aware of these issues, especially the ones that are close to home and are very, very relevant to the world that we live in. But at the same time, it certainly has a really, really negative impact that I think, quite frankly, doesn't get addressed enough.
I think your generation might be, because of your attitudes and insights, maybe lead the way to a change in that sort of way the world is going, maybe to more optimism and positivism and more of the good stuff. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think especially after this past summer, with a lot of what happened with a lot of the Black Lives Matter movement and those sorts of things, whatever side you're on, it definitely sparked a passion and so many young people, to make a change, regardless of what their beliefs are. So it's been really cool and really inspiring to see that, and I think that's something that'll continue on in the future.
Well, thank you, Sam. And after a short break, we'll invite Sam to share some final comments and some good advice. Stay tuned. You don't want to miss this. Welcome back. Today on Surviving Bad, we're talking about a growing concern for the mental health issues our teens and young adults face today. Let's see what advice our guest Sam has to share. Sam, this is your chance to really talk to kids and let them know what you think.
Absolutely. So I think on the first hand, if you're someone who's struggling, I think it's important to know what resources you have. I think with the pandemic, a lot of awesome online or resources on say your smartphone have been really good. 7 Cups, Talkspace is another one. Therapy apps like that have actually have been really cool and relatively accessible. Additionally, if you prefer to go the more traditional route, seeking help from a therapist or a psychologist is huge, and then from there potentially seeing a psychiatrist. I think another thing that's valuable too, maybe some valuable advice for parents is if your child comes to you and whether they ask for advice or share their feelings, is to listen and be transparent. I think the most powerful tool you have is to listen to what they have to say, because a lot of times people who are struggling just want to be heard, and that's something that really can't be swept under the rug. As far as individuals who are looking for advice on advocacy and that kind of stuff, I think really not. It's a bit of a cliche, but you can't be ashamed of what you're doing. It's very easy to have feelings of regret and embarrassment when you're doing it, because it's different. It's a lot of times people aren't willing to be very vocal about these things, and I know I certainly felt like a bit of an outcast when I started doing it. But looking back on it, I wouldn't change anything. It's given me some of the greatest experiences of my life, and finding the right network of people to really communicate with and share thoughts has been so valuable, and is part of the reason why I've been able to make all of these media appearances and start my own nonprofit at 19. So,
well, Sam, I got a question for you. What about friends and parents? Are there like litmus tests? Are there questions that you should ask somebody if you think they might be off a little bit? Are there ways to be proactive before the problems hit, instead of all the pressure being on the person with the problems? Can those who care and love them ask certain questions that make sense?
Yeah, I feel like there's no real one way of doing it. I think more of a prevention thing before any real problems arise is just having an open dialogue. Whether it be with friends or family, whether you're struggling or not, always having that openness there. I think also, I think there's a bit of there's an idea that if you ask someone about their mental illness or if they're struggling, it'll make it worse. This actually isn't true. So I think you can be more direct than you think you can when asking these questions. And a lot of the times, depending on who you're talking to, they'll actually be grateful that you asked and that you were caring. So like I said, there's no real one way of doing it, but there are definitely some misconceptions. And like I said, that open dialogue is easily the most important part of it all.
Well, thank you so very much, Sam, for sharing all of your insights. And obviously, we hope people get in touch with you if they need to talk to you. The information will be at the end of the show in the credits. And thank you all for joining us today. Check out our website, ahealthyiowa.org, for more information. And keep your eye on MediaCom MC22 for our next episode of Surviving Bad, where we explore stories of survival, hope, and inspiration on MediaCom MC22, your local programming leader.